And it's time to review another week ended at the AFEX Commodities Exchange. For the week of August 31st to 6th of September, number of contracts was down 98%. We have Michael Martins, portfolio manager, with the details. Great to have you, Michael.
Hi, Laddie. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's always a pleasure to be here.
Good morning. All right, let's have the update.
Thank you very much, Laddie. So just to go over the commodities market summary, if you look at the table in front of you, you would notice that the total value of transactions traded on the exchange went up by a factor of 42.16%, from 2.37 million naira to close to trading week at 102 million naira. And the total number of contracts traded on the exchange, however, fell by 98%, from 146,252 to close to trading week at 3,569 contracts. The total number of deals traded on the exchange, however, remained unchanged at 17. With the ACI, which is the AFEX Commodities Index, it went up slightly by 1% from 424.87 points to close to trading week at 427.34 points. The AFEX Export Index, much like the number of deals, also remained unchanged at 168.08 points. With regards to the volume traded on the exchange in the week under consideration, we generally saw a decline across board, with the biggest changes happening with maize, which went down from trading 145,183 contracts to just trading 45 contracts this week. And for some of the commodities that gained higher volume this week, we have soybean, which traded up from 1,130 contracts to close the trading week at 2,225 contracts. And then we also have for paddy rice, which traded through 2 contracts last week, to close this trading week at 374 contracts. With regards to the price changes on the exchange, we generally saw a decline across board for the major grains traded on the exchange, with maize being the first, losing 4.75%, losing 1,103 naira in the contract value to close the trading week at 22,097 naira per contract. And then secondly, we have soybean, which lost 6.78% in the contract value, losing 2,520 naira in the contract value to close the trading week at 34,664 naira per contract. And then lastly, we have paddy rice, which lost 2.27%, losing 500 naira in the contract value to close the trading week at 29,500 naira per contract. So that's largely all of what happened in the on the exchange in the week under consideration. And as we always say, if you want to know more about the commodities market, you can always go to our website, which is www.afexnigeria.com. And if you want to get started trading commodities, you can always download our app, which is available on iOS and also on Android.
Well, Michael, just before we switch the conversation, what's responsible for this decline in the price of grains, maize, soybean, paddy rice, all down for the week?
Thank you very much, Ini, for that question. As we have alluded to at different points in time during the course of this show, the commodities market is drawing to a close, and we are in the last months of the last volume of the last commodity season. So it is the case that in anticipation of the new harvest volumes that are going to come into the market, a lot of the people who currently still hold inventory are trying to sell off whatever inventory that they have in storage so that they can prepare for the new harvest season. So that's partly what is contributing to the lower prices that we are seeing for some of this for some of the grains on the exchange right now.
All right, Michael, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. We now switch over now and talk about smallholder farmers and financial inclusion, developing digital financial service solutions that are specifically designed for smallholder farmers and other value chain operators will be of great advantage. Smallholder farmers will be able to use credit systems, keep their money safe, and benefit from decreased transaction time and cost if they're included, especially in rural areas where smallholder farmers and other agri-SMEs typically find it hard to access financial services through conventional banking solutions. Well, to tell us what AFEX thinks and is doing about this, we have Oluwafunto Olashemo, the Financial Market Vice President at AFEX, to speak today. It's good to have you. Been a while.
Good to be here. It's always a pleasure being here.
Always a pleasure having you too. So what can we say are the primary difficulties facing Africa's smallholder farmers today in terms of access to finance? We know they have difficulty accessing finance, but what are some of those hurdles that they have to deal with?
Okay, very interesting question. Let me start by saying that when you consider a small older farmer, you have to have at the back of your mind or on top of your mind that if smallholder farmer is first a customer and has very wide range of financial needs or needs in generally that only digital financial services cannot solve. And if we look at how the smallholders have been operating in Nigeria, a number of barriers have actually played out in preventing them from accessing financial services. One is the fact that most of the smallholder farmers that operate within our ecosystem are largely fragmented, and therefore they have this disperse across different geographical locations. So if you look at the traditional financial services, it's very expensive to deploy financial services to these smallholder farmers. Apart from the cost of deploying these financial services to them, there is also the issue of data. Most smallholder farmers do not have any form of identification. They do not have any form of financial footprint. So it is pretty much difficult for any financial service to be able to assess any repayment capacity or any capacity of the farmer to access these financial services. So those two are very critical. And if we look at our operations in areas where we've worked as AFEX, the first thing we try to do for a lot of these farmers is to even create an initial financial footprint for them by doing by registering them and enabling that they have accounts and BVN, which is for most instances is the only form of identification that they have.
Right, and but how critical is this digital financial services, being integrated with other, digital services?
Okay, again, as I mentioned, that you should consider when thinking about digital financial services, you should consider a smallholder farmer as a customer with lots of needs beyond the needs of their core occupation. So they have needs to pay bills, they have needs to buy things, they even receive money from distant relatives outside of what they sell. So looking at it from that perspective, then realize that you can't just offer digital services without integrating with other critical aspects of what they do, whether it's the agric value chain. And when you look at the agric value chain, you're looking at what the farmers would do from input to production to aggregation to offtake and the rest of them. So ability to integrate this would provide a more holistic value to the smallholder farmers. It would give him an incentive to use digital financial services because that digital platform becomes a one-stop shop, not just for the production of his farm, but also to address to all his numerous needs that he has.
Okay, so when we talk about policy direction and also the role of the private sector, to bring them closer to this financial circle that we're talking about in financial inclusion, what direction do you think we can propose to both the public sector and even the private sector?
So one thing that interests me or excites me very much is actually the growth of digital or fintech, as the case may be, within our ecosystem. However, there is quite a number of barriers for smallholder farmers to uptake the services provided by this fintech. One of them, a number of them actually, you have the trust issue in which it's generally in our environment, we have a trust issue. So there's that trust issue that comes to play. There's also a lack of understanding of the products and services that are being provided by these digital financial service providers. And even beyond the lack of the knowledge, there's also a mismatch between how the products are being developed and delivered to the actual needs of the farmers. So in order to encourage smallholder farmers to be able to uptake these digital financial services, number one, there has to be lots of deliberate effort by all stakeholders, particularly both the private and the public sector, to educate and enlighten the smallholder farmers on the arrays of products that are available to them and that would benefit them. Outside of that, you need lots of word of mouth. You need lots of iterations of your products before you even deploy them to market. A lot of times, financial services or digital financial service providers develop products and they expect the farmers to receive it with open hands. On the other hand, there are iterations that your products needs to go through, and you need to develop those products with at the back of your mind that this is a smallholder farmer that is operating in a rural environment.
How profitable is it? Because these fintechs we're talking about, they are also mostly SMEs, startups, they're also looking for profit. So how profitable is it for them to start getting engaged, with the smallholder farmers? Perhaps that's why they are not finding it attractive.
The way I would like to look at this is that, again, going back to the fact that the smallholder farmer is first a customer, is a human with several needs. A lot of challenge that we have with a lot of digital service providers in our ecosystem is they try to go into the spaces alone. there need to be collaboration, because whether we, yes, digital services is on the rise, but there's still a huge cost. However, cheaper than the traditional, but the cost is still high. This cost can be minimized by collaborating. The smallholder farmers want an ecosystem of services delivered to him. If there is collaboration among this fintech, the cost of the product development and delivery would be cheaper, and then it would be easier for them to deploy these funds. Again, to be fair to the fintech, there is also the need on the state and the government level to create incentives that would encourage these fintech startups so that they can properly innovate, iterate their product, and let it go through that phase before they can start thinking. Also, number of schemes and incentives need to be put in place.
At least to reduce that
cost. And then, of course, collaboration among the fintech to reduce cost of product development and delivery.
Okay, but how can the digital financial services in the agri sector improve all processes involved in the value chain?
So it goes back to my first point. There needs to be a development of an ecosystem. Everybody needs to see that digital financial services, again, as I mentioned, alone would not solve the problem of the smallholder farmers. It needs to be done in collaboration with other digital services. If you agricultural value chain largely looks at how your agriculture, whether from inputs to farming to aggregation to offtake, ability of a smallholder farmer to work within that tightly integrated value chain would ensure that he is able to reap the best value from the produce. Now layering digital service on top of it makes life a whole lot easier for them. So there has to be that collaboration and creation of ecosystem within all the stakeholders of the agricultural value chain. And in addition to that, the fintech also needs to be innovative of how they create their products. Product adoption and value increase within the agri value chain, they need to be innovative. They need to have at the back of their mind the farmers. What would typically work within one ecosystem might not work in another ecosystem. So you need to look at the specific areas where you're deploying the solution. What is peculiar about them? The way you would deploy digital financial services to the male smallholder farmers is completely different when you're deploying to the female smallholder farmers. So they have
even when you compare states.
Exactly. So there's differences on state, there's differences on gender, there's differences on age.
Types of businesses.
Exactly. So a lot of people within the small... Recently, we see younger people coming into the space. But prior to now, you see older people. And the rate of adoption of digital services for the older ones is different. So you need to think about, how do I deliver these services using voice notes for someone that cannot read? How do I deliver this voice note for these services to a young person, yes, that can read, but doesn't have the patience to go through X, Y, Z steps? Right. So it has to do with a lot of creativity, innovation around product development, around deployment, also bearing in mind the cost of delivery of these services to the smallholder farmers.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. And thank you so much for telling us what AFEX is doing and how we can expand when we talk about financial inclusion
because
for the smallholder farmers.
You know, from the digital financial service providers and also the farmers. So highlight some of these risks for us.
So, well, again, risk with agriculture is always there. It's, but a lot of time it's just lack of understanding of the risk that is making a lot of people shy from that. Part of the risk you talk about when it comes to farming, you talk about production risk, right? And production risk really is, if I give a loan to a farmer, what is the probability he's going to pay me back? Again, right. I mentioned a lot of them do not have any form of identification, no data. And in cases where you have data, the data are not correct, right? So it's almost pretty much difficult for you then to now channel resources. So production risk is a key one. There is also market risk. When they produce, how quickly do they have access to sell? How quickly can they sell these things?
Well, it's a whole lot of
It's a whole lot of challenges.
Well, thank God we have AFEX every week, so we can always explore in the coming weeks. Thank you so much for joining us on Oluwafunmi Financial Market Vice President at AFEX.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
So let's switch over to the markets now. Yesterday, I think the markets ended a crossroads, in betwixt. I don't know. But well, Will help us understand what happened in the market yesterday. If it went up, I know it was the bear that we had at the end of the day. But anyway, let's take a very short break, and then when we come back, Will is already standing by to give us details of it.